I had this idea to walk backwards every day for 40 days in a row here in July, August, and a little bit of September 2024. I used to walk backwards almost every single day since the pandemic for several years. And what's going to happen is every single day I'm going to record my thoughts and feelings that's going on for me in real time about the creative process or whatever else comes up for these 40 days. And you're going to hear, maybe 5 to 7 minutes per day of the best of recorded during that live walking backwards for about a quarter to a half of a mile per day. And it's in real time. So I'm really walking backwards as I'm talking with you outside. So enjoy the whole episode, and here we go. Okay, good morning. It's August 26, 2024. Day 31, coming in the last 9 days now, final countdown. Today, it feels like madness. And the differential between someone who's mad, unstable, and a person walking around that's congruent and we would consider to be functional, from my perspective, is rather thin. Okay, so every morning for the last 31 morning, I have this repetition it's a cycle of inhaling that beautiful eucalyptus tree. And because there is a 24-hour period between them, and because it's part of a sequence, and because it's the first, usually only one, we in our culture would consider that to be, relatively normal. Like you wake up in the morning and you smell coffee, you go, I love the smell of coffee, right? Same thing essentially. But if I were to do that 12, 15 times in a day, if I were to do that 10 or 15 times in 1 hour, if I kept talking about the eucalyptus aroma and how beautiful it was and all the memories I had associated with it, or how I hated it and thought it was terrible and disgusting, it doesn't make a difference which side of the fence the conversation takes place on. Although when there's a negative stimuli, or a stimuli that someone interprets as negative, it's a little louder, if you know what I mean. There's a little more emotional energy to it most of the time. If I did that, that would be crazy, right? Especially if you're listening to it. You go, well, get away from the eucalyptus trees if you don't like them, So it's not the event. It's not the reaction. It's what I call the loop time. Like, how often does that loop happen? And if the loop happens with a lot of frequency and duration, then that indicates there's something a little off. There's something unstable. There's something is not right. There's an adjustment that needs to occur. And if it doesn't, it can be very unstable, not only to the person, but also to the person that the person's around. So if you want to tap into your own madness, if you want to tap into that world, find your loops and then take time out of the equation, and you start to etch or chip away at your character's areas of vulnerability, of concern, of where things are not settled, where things need further development, where things are hot emotionally. Yeah, let's say it that way. Where things are hot emotionally for the character, otherwise you wouldn't have a loop. And you could say, well, Joshua, yesterday you talked about cycles. How is a cycle any different than a loop? And for me, a cycle is something that has a natural occurrence. Like, for instance, you could say that smelling coffee in the morning is part of a natural cycle, right? You could say that looking for your keys for your car or for your house every morning before you leave, that would be a cycle. That would be a cycle of you leaving for work for the day or leaving the house for the day. That would be part of a cycle. But it becomes a loop. You went through looking for your keys 6 or 7 times in the last 15 minutes before you leave your house. It becomes a loop when it's a very small amount of information, a very small amount of reaction in terms of the kind of reaction and the width of reaction, and it gets repeated over and over and over without change. So basically frequency and duration, loop time. If it makes gets you loopy. It's a loop time. And it's a fun thing to play with for your characters when your characters have a certain kind of an edge, or if you want to demonstrate how they're starting to go a little off mentally because the pressure or the disturbance or the emotional intensity is getting so strong that it's impacting their ability to function or behave, go irrational, chaos. And you can do this in a very beautiful, subtle way by laying in foundational work, kind of like what we're talking about, where the behavior or the subject or the emotional response is in the world of, oh yeah, that fits a common reality, yeah. And then slowly or not so slowly in your narrative, it starts to crack and break and go into another zone. There's a famous film from the 60s or 70s, John Cassavetes, Gina Rowlands, and her groundbreaking film, or their groundbreaking film. It's something very simplistic, an unmarried woman where she literally goes mad, and the lead actress in real life is the wife of the director, and she did wonderful work. And it's about the slow watching a woman go into madness. And then we see the same thing in a lot of Shakespeare plays where there's a descent into madness. And one of the ways to accomplish this is this loop time that we're talking about, and then taking the intensity of the emotional life and ratcheting it up. And this is for all storytelling, not just film, actors, writers, directors. So I'm just passing a guy who's jogging in the morning, and by his look and feel and we as a person and his rhythm, this is something he does every once in a while. You can kind of tell it's not like he's training for a marathon, or maybe he is and he just started, right? But there's not a lot of finesse in his stride, or it's kind of heavy. He doesn't look like he's been doing this for a long time. And then you have someone like David Goggins, who does the 100-mile, 150-mile runs. And some people would say that, it's madness. What he does is madness. And there is that part. To go that deep is to go outside the realm. I just passed the guy that I see often walking his two beautiful, beautiful dogs. I don't know the names of dogs, but beautiful. And they have sort of a silver gray coat. And he was wearing gray, and how we as characters and people tend to have a color palette. Like if you look into my closet, you'll see a lot of grays and blues when it comes to shirts and t-shirts. A lot of grays and blues. So my question to you is, what colors populate your wardrobe? What colors do you lean towards? And then what colors would your character have? So whenever there's an anomaly, it's always interesting to look up, dead or alive, if you are noticing it at that level, to see what meaning is as a power animal or as a symbolic animal. Thanks for a lovely time, and hasta luego. Today is Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. There's no one parked here. I don't get to see the people that go to work or pass them. There's no one. Empty. There's space. Let's talk about spaciousness, or the relationship of space in the most overt way. So in the most simplistic day-to-day reality, the mother-child relationship, there's the mother and then there's the child. And if the child needs warmth or needs to feel connected, then they talk about this oxytocin that gets released to it, and it's you're skin to skin with your child. So there's a bonding that happens through the closeness, through the touch. When I'm at that level, it's intimate and it's warm. There is no space. There is no space between myself and the other. And that creates a kind of relationship. And we relate to that as love. And then the opposite, again, we're talking big, general sweeping generalizations. And the opposite is also true. If we keep our distance from someone or something or someplace, then that's usually connected to, you could say hate. You could say other words, but let's go with fear for right now. In day-to-day interactions that people, places, characters deal with is the space between two people, and how that expands and contracts based on a variety of circumstances and character traits. And it's something that we as artists really need to develop in a very conscious way. And it's instinctual, so it's there. Most people don't even think about it. Most people don't have this conversation. In the pandemic time, I did notice that everyone became hyper aware of how close someone was or wasn't. That 6-foot nonsense. That 6-foot social norm that was adopted, which in a way was putting people's focus of attention on what we're talking about, but in a very fear-driven, reactive kind of way. And this conversation is about working with this in a very conscious way as a part of our creative process. So how does this show up in day-to-day life? It shows up in one of the most interesting ways for me when I'm walking down a street on a sidewalk. So you have the constraint of the amount of space because you're on a sidewalk. And if I'm walking in one direction, a person is walking towards me. In a country where people drive on the right side of the road, that's important because that's sort of the accepted norm on an unconscious level. And that adjustment period, 100% what we're talking about. At a certain point, in terms of closeness of two people walking towards each other, I'm going to start to adjust. I'm going to start to drift ever so slightly to the right, and they will as well. So it's an accommodation that happens. And what I work on, consciously doing that accommodation. So my accommodation just happened, basically creating this dance between myself and this other person, either consciously or unconsciously, about building that sensitivity and that ability to respond. And in terms of relationship and in terms of building that awareness, I find this to be one of the most helpful things. And you can work at it at the most subtle level. It doesn't have to be overt. It can be very, very subtle. At this point, you might be thinking, wow, Josh, that's really heady. That's you living in your brain. And how do you get up in the morning? Is this what this is like for you? It's not an intellectual experience. It's an awareness, and it's connected to, at least in these circumstances, another human being. You can do the same thing with an object. If for any reason you don't want to work with human beings, you can work with an object. You can place an object and feel how you feel about it, and then move the object around and build the relationship with the object. Become more aware of your relationship with the object. But through the awareness, you do alter the relationship. And then there's this other part, which is the spaciousness of myself with myself, and this internal spaciousness or lack of spaciousness. So if I can build that relationship between myself and myself, then I can start to modulate, bring awareness to myself within myself, my thoughts, like my heart, like my foot, like etc., etc. And if I can start to accommodate all these things and to give spaciousness where there feels like there's tightness, if I can give spaciousness where it feels like there's too much distance, I can move a little closer to me, I can move a little further away from me, then my primary relationship, which is my relationship to me, can have more sensitivity, can have more flow. This topic is so vast, it's unbelievable. So we will let it go for now and just know that there's much, much more that we can explore together in the future. Today is August 28, 2024, day number 33. There's a quietness, there's a stillness. There seems to be less traffic, less cars, less buses, which is improbable. That's the feeling. And then that one lone motorcycle, the contrast is just astounding. Your customized norm for sound level and what that would do to you. I know we've talked about this before. There's this element of, in camera gear, they have what they call a sensor. And the sensor is the amount of information, and this may not be accurate for people that are camera enthusiasts, but this is the general sense. The sensor is the device that captures the image, essentially. So the larger the sensor, the more surface area, the more density of the information that the camera lens is going to record. So you want a larger sensor, because a larger sensor implies you're getting more data. So that's really important. Your sensor is really important, and then you can work with it. But whatever you capture is what you work with. And the lights just went out. And yeah, I think it's based on time, because there wasn't a major shift in in lighting just now in terms of, oh, the sky got lighter or what have you. But it's something that we'll watch for together in the coming days. In the more richness you have to work with when it comes to your art. And this isn't a constant, but it's a somewhat truism that people who tend to be more introverted tend to be more sensitive, tend to be ones that allow more imprint, and people like that tend to be writers, as opposed to people who are more tuned to extroversion tend to, and these are natural, innate sort of situations, not to say that you can't have both, but they tend to lean towards expression, because extrovert, expression, right? It's all part of the same root in terms of the words that we use to describe it. Express. So you're going to see extroverts be more familiar, more akin, or more adapt, or more comfortable being actors because they're expressing. And they may or may not be as feeling. And one of the games, and I use game in the kindest way, one of the games is having a comfortability level or an expression range that includes both to whatever degree is something that you want to experience. And that's what life is about. Life is about going to making an impression, and making an expression. Impress, you're impressing on the image, right? You're impressing from the sense, making that an impression, and that leads to an expression. Impression, expression. See you tomorrow. Okay, good morning. Today is the 29th of August 2024, and it's day 34, and it's really gray skies today. No Santa Monica Mountains, no San Gabriel Mountains, super gray. One of the things I noticed this morning, which was a huge anomaly, which was, remember a couple of weeks ago I talked about artistic laundry, and there's that old sign, and it had been there for a long, long time. And other things have come and gone and built on top of it or whatever, but it's still there. And then today I walked by and lights were on, and it was open, the front door was open, and some guy was making a delivery, or I don't know what was going on. Something was going on. And if this had been my first day, then I would have taken that in as a norm. Because this is my 34th day, I take it in as an anomaly. The implications of that are huge when it comes to setting your world in motion for any kind of narrative. Patterns. The patterns that are playing out have a certain rhythm, have a certain timing, and we all are co-creating them. Me being present for it changes it, or adds to it, or subtracts to it. But I become a part of the pattern. I become part of the larger tapestry, shall we say. It makes this. So when you're sharing your narrative, it's the same thing. If the lead main character takes in the world in a way where whatever the norm is, whatever the tapestry is of that world, we will also accept, because that person is the guide, if you will. Based on their response is how we feel about it, because that's how they feel about it. And when you make it so that the person, the lead character, the person who's creating the baseline, if you will, the baseline reality, when you do that, then you're letting us know. It doesn't even have to be the lead. It could be the narrator. It could be someone that we innately trust, like the postman, or someone UPS delivery guy, someone who we innately have trust in. So funny, trust is very much based on time and circumstances, because if you're telling a narrative through the lens of 1950, if you wanted someone in the culture to trust someone from an archetypal or from a job description point of view, we would do like the lawyer, the banker, or the clergyman, the priest. And based in today's world of 2024, the trusted person would be the UPS driver, or the Amazon delivery guy or gal. Because our culture has a way of making a hero or vilifying certain jobs, certain archetypes at certain times, and at other times glorifying them, right? Vilify or making them a hero or lifting them them up, and I can go through a lot of different narratives that are very well known at different times in history where the writer has created the same job as both a hero and a villain, or someone who holds up the structure and someone who doesn't, who's a maverick. But this all has to do with the structure of the fabric of the life that we're diving into, the world. It's great, had a roof over my head, had 3 meals, went to school, got educated, life is good. Middle class, nice house. So that was the reality, right? Cut to 2020, 30 years later, and ask how your childhood is. It's not so good. Oh my gosh, I had microaggressions against me all the time. I had problems speaking up in my family. People were verbally abusive, on and on. The past is malleable. I now have a different perspective based on what I'm bringing to. Do you see how malleable the past is? And the future is equally malleable. I feel like people kind of get that part. Future's malleable, yes. I'm co-creating my future. Well, you're co-creating it, but you're also, in a way, creating the story around it and what it means, which is the same thing I've done with my childhood. I've created a story around what it means based on my thoughts and feelings of what I think about, what the culture thinks about, the different layers of reality. And all of that is set in place by micro and macro patterns that we recognize, that we take in as the norm or the tapestry of that time. And these streetlights are definitely on a timer because it was the exact same time yesterday and the lights went out at the exact same time. So now I know it's a timer. Why? Because of a pattern, because of a noticing, and I notice it, and I check it, and then I have a memory of it. Same thing with a laundromat. The laundromat is never open. Never in 34 days. Monday through Friday, 7 days a week, right? Never, ever. First time. Now that's if you believe me, right? Now this group of what appears to be teenagers, female teenagers, this is also a part of a larger pattern because I've seen them before as well. It's highly unusual. And they're jogging. They have outfits on that indicate they're going to be running. And the size of the group was about the same. And so now I think, okay, today's Thursday. Is this a Thursday situation? But all of this started with Artistic Laundry being open. And all of this riff that we went on about creating the world and past, present, and future and expectations and having a common reality and having someone anchor the story so we know what's part of the norm, what's outside of that, what's an anomaly. All of that came from the one noticing of the shop being open. And I walked by now and the guy did whatever he needed to do because the shop is no longer open. And all of that is really important for narrative. I just had another new experience. So thanks for coming in. Thanks for the chat. Looking forward to our last 5 days together. Today is August 30th, 2024, day 35. Every day offers its own patterns, and within the pattern is the interruption of the pattern or the anomaly, and today offers that up quite well. I had a small pattern break about getting here, on what side of the street I walked up. That was fun, responding to things that were happening, people living on the street, people walking dogs, people jogging, etc., responding to those changes. The other thing that's coming up for me is that since today is day 35, 5 more days, and I have been a part of this rhythm and everything that's known and unknown to me, all the adjustments, like how I came here, I had a bunch of adjustments. Or I don't even know they're adjustments. I responded. I have a certain way of going to this street to do my backward walking, and along the way I make all these micro adjustments. It's kind of like when you go to work, right? Most people have a certain patterned way of going, and I would assume other people have a certain way of going that they change a lot, or that they respond to because of patterns of traffic. Today we have the commercial truck that picks up from porta potties, 2 guys sitting in the cab asleep. That's something that happens 2 or 3 times a week. This is a good example, is that I could make up a story as to, or probability causes of why their motor. So there's all these possible things of stories I could make up. I wouldn't know. Maybe the guy just was running out of gas. I was like, I'll save gas today. Maybe it was running when they parked and it ran out of gas and they're both asleep. we could just speculate all day long. And that's the story we tell ourselves. What happens is that we take a thought, a speculation, an idea, a non-reality, and because we think it, and maybe we think it more than a couple of times, or it's been confirmed a couple of times, that we now take that as a constant reality. Because we as human beings are constantly looking to make meaning. And so we assign meaning to things that may or may not be true. But because we do it, and we do it fast, and we're facile, and we're consistent, and we have point of view, the thoughts and feelings, that becomes our reaction, but it's not based in reality. So when I make those thoughts a reality based on a neutral experience, the neutral experience is I walk by this truck, because of my history, I know the truck is usually running, this time it's not. And because of that anomaly, I could make up a story in the same way that I made up a story about the engine running, and that was the anomaly when I first walked past them. I am in the center of all that I create. So I am creating this experience of walking backwards with you 35 days in a row. And in a few days, I won't be here. My 40 days will be complete. And for a little while, someone may or may not notice that I'm not here in the mornings for now. And now I want to talk about feelings, but primarily those were thought driven. Behind every thought is a feeling, behind every feeling is a thought when you're a certain age and above. Because people talk about their emotions, right? And then they talk about their body as if it's separate, but it's not. It's all one continuous flow of energy. So the thought helps to create a feeling. The feeling helps to create a thought. Change your thoughts, change your feelings, change your feelings, change your thought. Change your body, change the way you think. All this science reports, studies, stats. If you exercise at a certain level for a certain duration, you'll get a certain feeling. That's your feelings. And then if you have certain feelings, you'll have a different clarity of thoughts and feelings. So I could access the feeling or access the thought. I feel a coolness all over my skin. That's a feeling. I see these beautiful pink flowers that are just so lovely. Remember the other day where someone opened up the laundry? I think it's because for some reason they opened it up from the front, because I'm seeing activity in the back and it looks pretty common. I'm seeing this jacaranda that's losing all of its bark on one side, and I feel sad for the jacaranda. So interesting. Noticing the health of the tree. The ficus, robust and healthy and thick and green and clearly very happy. So yeah, our thoughts are connected to our feelings, and our feelings are connected to our thoughts. And tomorrow we will talk more about all of that.